Hi, I'm Clark Kokich, and I just want to speak briefly about this title before we shift over to my presentation. I know you guys all came here to be inspired, find the newest, coolest things that are happening, be able to go back, take them into your own organizations and help push things forward, make things happen, be creative, explore all the newest, most exciting technologies. And this guy shows up and says, why client CEOs are terrified of all your new digital technology and what to do about it. That doesn't sound very inspiring. So this is going to be more of a practical lab. I spent a lot of time, for a lot of years, creating marketing programs. And now I don't do that anymore. I spend most of my time talking to senior leadership at clients, CMOs and CEOs about what it's going to take to get their organizations to make the leap. I think we've gotten to the point where everybody in business knows something big and fundamental has changed, that we should be further along, that agencies should be further along, that clients should be further along, but we're not. And that's what this presentation is about. Where exactly are we going, and what is it about that is so friggin' hard, and what do we have to change structurally and organizationally in our process and the people and the way we approach things to actually fully take advantage of what's happened, to catch up with where consumers are. So could we switch to my presentation? So if you ask a CEO what they think of digital marketing, and you listen to them, this is what they'll describe. It's like comets. I'm always getting my people coming in and showing me some really fantastic promotion we did, and maybe it cost $2 million and generated a gajillion views, or even if they assign a dollar value to it, they can prove that it made $10 million. But next month it's gone. And my business hasn't changed. And it's like a comet. These things streak across the sky. They can be very exciting, they can have a positive ROI, they can have a significant impact with customers, but they're not doing what CEOs want to do. And there's only one thing that these people want to do, and it's important to know because they're the ones that are going to have to change everything to get our organizations where they need to go. And the only thing they want to do is to build shareholder value. That's all they care about. And our role in marketing and product development in the customer touching side of the business is to help do that by accomplishing this. And I'm going to, 3 minutes of theory. Every product, when it's launched, starts out on the left side of this chart. And there's something special about it. It's unique, it's different, it causes people to talk about it. If it weren't special, it would not succeed. So every product for every brand that you work on, at some point, was a pure specialty product. And with very notable exceptions, I'm going to bet that everybody in here works for an agency on a brand or a client brand that has been moving through some inexorable force of nature towards commodity status. And over time, because of force of competition, it gets tougher and tougher to stay special. And this is the best definition I've ever seen of marketing. Marketing is everything we do to push our brand back towards being special. That's really what our job has always been. There's a lot of aspects to marketing, depending on where you are in the tunnel. But when the CEO in the funnel, but where the CEO thinks about it, this is what the CEO thinks about. What's the sustainable competitive advantage? What does our brand, our product, our service own in the minds and hearts of the customer that is ours and ours exclusively? And how are you helping us maintain that and amplify it and strengthen it? And this was a tough assignment when we were pure advertising people. I spent the vast majority of my life in advertising, either in the client or the agency side of the business, and we face these problems all the time. Let's say you were working on an airline, and your job as the marketing person, client or agency, is to say something about that airline that will make it different than everybody else, every other airline. And we all know this has got to be the biggest commodity product in the universe. If you fly, particularly domestically, if you fly domestically, you could be teleported into a plane and wake up and be asked, after an hour of experiencing this plane, what's the brand? And you would have no friggin' clue. I mean, this is a pure commodity business. And so this is what has happened in this industry. They've allowed this to happen. And then they would go to the agencies and say, well, now think of something to say that will make it all better. And that's a tough assignment. And you saw a lot of really silly advertising. I can remember friendly faces and music and trying to tap into the thrill of flying and all sorts of things that should be true, but when you match it up to the experience of being on that plane, it was an absolute lie. But that's what we were stuck with for years. And even in 1999, 2000, as the internet took off and going into the early part of the last decade, as broadband exploded and penetration exploded and we were really able to do digital marketing and advertising, it was still just yapping at customers. And I used to give talks then about how digital is all different, and it was different in the weeds, but at the highest level, it was just a new way to get out and just yap, 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 and tell people things that you probably knew weren't true. Or to find some little thing that was true and talk about it until it wasn't true anymore because your competitor had copied it. It was very limited palette. Very, very difficult. And I remember being in the agency business and always feeling like I was the tail being wagged by the dog. The dog was doing all these things, and at the very end, somehow, we had to figure out how to make it better. And I went to the client side. I went to work for McCaw Cellular, Cellular One, and I liked that better because there was more things in my control. But marketing and advertising was still over here. The product itself was over there. And even though the classic definition of marketing is to identify a customer need and to fill it, marketing departments in most companies and the agencies and service firms that work with them didn't spend much time really doing that. There were some notable exceptions, but for the most part, we weren't marketers, we were marketing communications people. And that's changed because over the last 5 years now, when you fly on an airline, it's not just the plane. It's the mobile experience. It's the online experience. It's the out-of-home experience. It's the social world that has been created around that experience of being on the plane. Any of you have flown Virgin America, you know that this is a company that not only has decided to make the planes better, they've created an entire digital cocoon around the planes that makes the full experience better. And that's a company that's built their business with virtually no advertising, simply by building this digital cocoon and being special and different in an industry where they gave up trying to be different 30 years ago. And that's the model for what I'm going to talk about. And I've got a couple examples that I want to show how of companies that I think that have done this well, and then try to draw some inferences from it that would be useful in your own jobs. But to summarize, this has been our jobs for 50 years. Change perceptions. And there's, I think, 300,000 people in the US. It's probably more than that, but that's the number I could find going through SIC code listings of people working in marketing or advertising, either in client or agency jobs. Those 300,000 people, virtually all of them, certainly the one my age, which are the people that still run a lot of the agencies and still run a lot of the clients and are the CEOs of these big clients, we all grew up learning exactly the same thing. We studied the same books, went to the same conferences, we were mentored by people who believed the same things, and everything we learned was to do this, to change perceptions. And then we wake up one day, and our job now is to change reality. There's been a big theme in the last few years that digital marketers need to go back to learn how to be storytellers, and I believe that's true. You do need to tell stories, but first you have to have a story that's worth telling. We need to be story creators. We now have the tools to change what it means to be a customer. We can help define the product because those tools, social, mobile, viral, gaming, digital out of home, all of that stuff is in our area. And it's just as important. There are, with the exception of some packaged goods advertisers, there are very few categories where the digital experience is not a defining piece of your relationship with a company. And if they have an inferior digital experience, in your mind, they're an inferior brand. And our industry has not responded this, in my view, in any way, shape, or form with the speed and clarity that they need to. So that's what I want to talk about. So why has this been a problem? What I'm saying isn't new. In fact, I think there's a whole new, I haven't seen it yet, but the movie Naked Brand coming out, there's a lot of people talking about this, becoming product builders, not just advertising people. You've been hearing this for years, reading about it, but it's just not happening. There's a couple examples. I wrote a book or a book/app that came out a year ago called Do or Die, and I went out to find great case histories and called everybody I knew in the industry, send me what you got, and what I saw were a lot of comments. And I include that from the work we did as well, Razorfish as well. Finding 8 cases for that book was really hard. That was a year ago. I think it might be a little easier, but I still believe the vast majority of brands aren't getting this right. And so I've really spent a lot of time thinking about it, interviewing people, our people, competitors, client people, and tried to boil it down to what are the real challenges, and I've come up with 3. The first is we still need big ideas, but we need to redefine what they are. I think the vast majority of people in our industry are still chasing the wrong kind of big idea. We need to reverse the process. To me, this is the most important. Too much of the work we do starts in channels and filters up through organizations. That needs to be stopped. Ideas must be created at the center and then pushed down into the channels. And I'll talk about that. And we need to master the art of collaboration. You can't go to one of these events without talking about collaboration. It's absolutely critical, and I have an example of something we were involved in that I thought was the perfect example of collaboration as a model. Not necessarily steal this, but something to aspire to. If you get those 3 things right, a year from now, your brand can be recognized as an absolute leader in where marketing is going. Very few people are getting those right. So let's start first about the big ideas. This is probably the easiest of the 3. Everybody knows what a big idea is in the traditional world, whether it be television or magazine or radio. You would take broadcast media and you would create a communication and that was your big idea. Some device or story or spokesperson or twist of an idea. Through the power of your imagination, you would go out and tell people, or if you didn't have great imagination, you just spend a lot of money and try to beat them down. You would tell people what you wanted them to believe. And so that created this whole world of what's a big idea? A big idea in that world is a communication idea. I think we need to ask different questions to get the big ideas that we need now, to get the big ideas that a CEO will pay attention to, the kind of digital cocoon product ideas that we need. You have to ask different questions. And Virgin is a great example of this first one. Well, they could have said, well, we got these really cool planes, and we're going to have great service. Let's go tell people that. Or we could ask this question. What do customers hate about our category? This is a really fundamental change because the traditional way of coming up with a big idea would be to find your best customers, your heavy users, however you define them, and really dig into their heads and find out why are they so committed to your brand. What is it in terms of objective reasoning, emotional tug, identification, personality, whatever it is, why have we captured those people so thoroughly? And let's take that understanding and go spread it to the people that aren't believers. This completely reverses that. This is saying, what are we fucking up? Us as a company or as an industry. What, when people talk about our industry, do they bitch and complain about? And can we make it better? Can we use all of these digital tools that are out there to make it easier, better, more satisfying to do business with us? And if we can do that, we have an opportunity to redefine who we are as a brand and to win, to gain a competitive advantage, to build shareholder value, and to have the CEO come down from the corner office and walk into the marketing department and say, I want to meet the person who came up with this idea. And I'll show an example of this as well. I'm going to go into a couple cases, but that, I think, is one big thing. Another great way to get into this is to ask, what are the top 3 items on the CEO's agenda? And I guarantee, if you go back, it's October now, almost November, dig back in your emails or your videos and your intranet and find the January statement from the CEO. These are the 3 things we're really going to be focused on this year. And look at each one and say, can digital help accomplish one of those goals? I guarantee the answer will be yes to at least one of them. The CEO has picked goals that is going to move the business forward. The CEO is not focused on comments, is not focused on quick fixes. They want to build the shareholder value and move the business forward. And if you're doing that, that's going to drive the change in the organizations that need to take place. And the last one is what deeper need can we satisfy? And this gets back to what I was talking about earlier. A big part of advertising, planning, and marketing communication traditionally was not to just look at the features and selling benefits and the objective story around the brand, but to try to figure out what is it about our brand that fills a deeper need, that creates a personal association, a love, a commitment, where people would say, that's my brand. And then we would try to take that and with a big idea, communications idea, convey that to people who didn't feel that yet. That's very, very hard to do. There's some great examples of companies that have done it, but I think it's getting harder and harder to do. There is just simply, I think, less tolerance for empty storytelling among the consumer population. And they can see it coming. I mean, when I was a kid, I remember getting my first TV, and when the box spoke, I listened. My kids, when they went to school, would come home and say, "You're in advertising, Daddy, right? We learned today that you're just trying to convince us to buy things we shouldn't buy." Very different thing. When I was your age, many, many years ago, we would come in on a Monday and talk about the ads that we saw on the weekend. That's what people talked about. Nobody does that anymore. Advertising is not a cultural touchstone in the way it was. I mean, you may not even understand, having not experienced this, some of you, just how different it was. It's much more, there's so much more of it. I used to give talks in the 80s, there are 500 advertising messages a day, so yours better be good. Now, I can't find a right number, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, it's thousands. We're inundated, we're sarcastic, we're trained to ignore it. It's just not the same. But you can take this insight about the deeper need that we can satisfy for customers, and we can create an experience that allows us to do it in reality, not talk about it, but to actually do it. So that's very big change. That's asking agencies to do things they've never done. That's asking marketing departments to do things they've never done. When you get into this, you'll see that in order to accomplish that, I think we need completely different organizations and a different process to get there. So when you're looking at that kind of change, it's always useful to look at a couple organizations that have done it or are doing it, and how they did it and whether it worked or not, because that's a really good question. Does this stuff actually work? So I'm going to talk about 2 that you may have heard of. Both of them have been written up. Both won awards at Cannes. Both are a couple years old, which I gave this presentation at Future M in Boston last week, and a couple people came up afterwards and said, those are a couple years old. You should maybe get some new ones. Well, part of the problem is they're hard to find, and the other part of the problem is, the fact that they're 2 years old and still having an impact is actually a good thing. You don't know after 90 days if what you did mattered. Just because people talked about and got a lot of attention and maybe got a temporary spike in sales, it doesn't mean that it really mattered in terms of building the brand. So one is Epic Mix from Vail, and the other is Right to Future from Nike. So think about Vail. Vail runs 17 resorts across the United States. I think they may be the largest, more than $1 billion in revenue. I think they're the largest ski operator in the country, certainly the largest premium ski operator, running first-class destination resorts. And, you think about, so what do they have? They have these beautiful mountains where people like to ski. They've invested a lot in these villages, so in the evening you can have a great meal and have fun drinking with all the beautiful people. They got fantastic snow, and they invest in snowmaking equipment and lifts, and they go places and build them where the snow is great. And in their advertising, this is what they always talked about. If you would have bought Ski Magazine or any of these magazines over the last 10 years, if they were advertising, this is what it was. It was the facilities, it was the snow, it was the experience of the mountain. That's how they differentiated. And I don't know how Robert Katz figured this out, but 3 years ago, Robert Katz was the CEO of Vail, and their business was in the crapper, just like everybody else's after the meltdown. This is obviously, expensive discretionary spending item, and they're trying to figure out what to do. So he calls all his marketing people together, and they give him a lot of presentations about all the new exciting things they could be doing. Social is growing, mobile, we could build applications, we could do this, we could do that. They showed him case histories. And for some reason, Robert Katz had this, and I've talked to him a lot about this, and I don't know where he had this insight, but he just kind of knew that wouldn't work. Like, we need to get our best customers to buy more passes and to come here, be more loyal to our resorts, and to increase our sales and profits. And I'm just not seeing how this will happen. And what he did was he called a broad group together, not just marketing, but it was marketing, operations, finance, and IT. He brought in consultants, agencies. I think Crispin was the agency. I know Crispin was the agency at the time. Outside technology consultants, and put them in a room, and they started talking. And his question was, what can we build with all this digital stuff that'll make it better to be a pass holder at Vail? So we don't have to talk about it. So our customers will tell their friends how cool we are. And they spent a lot of time digging into this and looked at a lot of research, and they finally decided to capitalize on the insight they had from some research about what skiers really get from skiing. Yes, it's a rush, it's fun, but what you really get from skiing is a personal sense of accomplishment. And people are either competing with themselves to get better, they're competing with their friends to get better, they're competing with themselves or their friends to ski the most vertical feet, to ski the most days, to ski the most mountains. They are bragging about what they've accomplished, and that underlying piece of what it means to be a skier. And if you're buying passes, you're a skier. You're not just somebody doing this for every once in a weekend. You're into this. This is part of who you are. This is what I do. I'm a skier. And when the winter comes, that's who I am. And they took that insight and started brainstorming, and it didn't take long for them to come up with what has become a fundamental way that they've transformed their business. They created Epic Mix. And you'll see this is not an advertising program at all. This is a product development program. And the marketing people were actively involved in helping to create this, but it was also supplemented by operations and IT and finance, who became committed to make this go forward. And above all, Robert Katz, who imposed the discipline to say, you all, I don't care about your silos or what you think is right, we have to make this work. They put RFID tags in 800,000 passes. They installed RFID readers at the gates. So that was an immediate benefit of just making it easier for people to just speeding up the lines. It also meant that they now had a record of everything everybody did on the mountain. And they got their IT people to build an environment that allowed them to capture that in real time, because they knew without the real-time information, this couldn't be as powerful as they wanted it to be. And they created Epic Mix. So if they're collecting all the data. It's really easy. You just go log on, you put in your pass number, and boom, you're now in Epic Mix. So when you come home at the end of the day, you have a record of everything you did on the mountain. You know where you skied, how many feet you skied. You can see what friends have done. While you're on the mountain during the day, since this is updating in real time, you can look at what you're accomplishing. You can share your accomplishments with your friends. You can see, I think they did this in the second year, which shows their ongoing commitment. You can see where your friends are on the mountain in real time. Where is everybody? You can text them, find out, let's meet for lunch. You can earn pins. There's a whole series of pins that you can earn. So they created a leaderboard. So if you were competitive, you could go on there and compete for feet skied, number of mountains, number of days, number of lifts, number of black diamond lifts, number of pins that you'd earn. It became a whole environment. And then at any point, from inside Epic Mix, you could share that information to your social networks. So what happened? I won't give you the numbers for the first year because I want to give you the numbers for the second year because they're so staggeringly good. They had a great first year. And they had almost 100,000 of their customers sign up and use the system. They experienced double-digit growth. And you talked to Robert Katz and you said, so why did you continue it? He said, well, I can't stop it. This is part of who we are. I can put $10 million in it to build a new restaurant, or I can spend $5 million on new lifts, or I can spend another $5 million to enhance and maintain Epic Mix, and I'm going to do that every year. So the second year, the big idea they had was to put professional photographers on the mountains. They're out candidly taking pictures of people as they ski. And some of them are action shots or just as a group standing around, hell, let me take a picture. They swipe your card, and when you get back, that picture is waiting for you to post to Facebook. And you've got a professional picture. And right now, I haven't seen yet, but I know they've got new ideas for this year. At the end of the second year, they had over 200,000 people posting, I think a total reach of their social campaign was 200 million impressions. They had a 27% increase in revenue, which was far in excess of the industry as a whole. They do research with their customers. This is who they are. They believe that the uptake among their pass holders will double again this year. And I spoke to him again in May, and he's ecstatic with what this has done. So this is an example of a big idea, but it's not, and this was the first thing, big idea, but not a marketing communications idea. This is the kind of thing everybody in this room needs to be thinking about. How can I help our company do something like this? So the second thing on there was the big idea. The other is reverse the process. And so I thought I had that book up here from with all the people that are exhibiting here. You can go to Ad Tech or look at the Lumi slide, and there's a gajillion companies. And this is all necessary because each of these discrete areas on our business are very difficult technologically to execute. So you've got, and we're the same within Razorfish and every agency. You've got your mobile experts, your social experts, your search experts, your data experts, your digital marketing experts, your digital media experts. And you have to because it's so complicated. And they're out working with these companies who are building technologies exclusively in each one of these channels. And then the clients, because the budgets in these areas are no longer tiny, are building their own departments. So right now, somewhere close to here, there's a mobile agency, or pardon me, could be a mobile agency or the mobile division of a bigger agency presenting to the mobile group and a client, talking about the mobile technologies they should develop to execute their mobile strategy. And that's fine. It's important, but it's absolutely insufficient. And the companies that are successful will put a halt to channel up program design. That's what we've got. You've got these channel up programs that each one can actually have a positive ROI in a very discrete sense. That, it made money. I can point to the incremental contribution margin to the company, and it was 10 times what we paid on this program. So see, give me more money next year. If I were a CEO, and I was at one point, I can remember people bringing me ideas, and that's cool, that's cool, that's cool. You can go for months going, that's cool, good job, and go, this is not moving us forward. That's cool, but it's not making us different. And you're out there looking for who's got an idea that is going to make us different. And I remember when you'd see one, it was just like, oh my God, come and talk to me about that. And everybody else, let's get in here. That's what we need to do. That's what CEOs want. And Channel Up Ideas I don't think will ever do that for them. Idea down programs will do it. Idea down programs, and that's what Epic Mix is, and that's what the next one I'm going to talk to you about is. A big idea, and then love your expertise on mobile, but your job is to make this big idea fly. And you have, I expect, unlimited imagination and creativity within your area. I'm not putting restraints on the degree of innovation that you can bring. In fact, I want innovation, but I'm building a corral. Your job is to take this idea and make it magical. You know, the most recent thing I've seen like this would be the Red Bull Stratosphere thing. You have an idea like that, everybody in the organization knows, social, mobile, digital, whatever it is, we need to make that work. It's an anchor point and a rallying cry for people to all come together and have to try to accomplish something. Big ideas, not advertising ideas, big product impact ideas driven down into the channels, not the other way around. So a great example of this is the Right to Future campaign for Nike, and I know coming from the Northwest, everybody up here has seen a lot of this. I'm going to run through the actual elements of the campaign very quickly because you could talk about everything they did for years because there was a lot of pieces to it. So I'm going to go through it quickly. But then I want to draw out from it, and this is an example of idea planning, but idea down planning, but it also leads into the final thing I want to talk about. So this was the 2010 World Cup. Adidas owns football globally. They own the football footwear category globally. They're the sponsor of the World Cup. I think they spent $60 million to buy the global sponsorship. Nike is locked out. I don't know how much more they spent beyond that in promoting and advertising it worldwide, but that's their thing. And Nike wants and needs to get a piece of that. I think at the beginning of the Right to Future campaign, or before 6 months ahead of the World Cup, they had a bunch of different Facebook pages in the category that probably added up to hundreds of thousands of people globally. Nothing that was having an impact at all. And so we all know Right to Future as the fantastic 4-minute film that they did the global Facebook release on, and that got a lot of attention, won a lot of awards. It was well-deserved. But Right to Future started with an insight about the kids around the world who play football and their love of the sport, their connection to the stars of the sport, and their desire to be a part of that. And like for Nike, their audience is young boys, teenage boys, because that really drives the category. And their understanding of the passion that they have for this sport and their own desire to get better and better at it all the time. And they created something called the Chance, and the Chance was a very simple idea. It was basically an opportunity for you to express your passion for the sport by showing your football skills, by creating a videotape and then uploading it and have other people evaluate it and vote on it and talk about it. They then took the best submissions and put a formal thing in place with professional coaches and brought players together to evaluate their skills. And after this whole process leading up to the World Cup, this young man was chosen as the highest, by this process, the Chance, the highest quality, highest potential football player in the world, non-professional football player in the world. And through that, they started to build up a very large social presence around the Chance and started to get their customers paying attention. And at no point did they talk about the shoes, did they talk about the brand, they didn't talk about their love of athleticism or accomplishment or achievement in sport, which are all core elements of the Nike brand. They just did it, and that's really important. They didn't talk about it, they did it. They did something that mattered. And they took that, and again, I'm not going to go through all the stuff they did at the World Cup itself, because it was just a whole line of things that you would typically call guerrilla marketing. But now with mobile applications and social, is just can have a global impact. And what happened was very quickly through the process, people figured out if you wanted the most up-to-date, absolutely critical information from the World Cup, you would start by going to the Nike Facebook page, because they were on the ground in South Africa. They had a nerve center where people were taking feeds from all the events with live photography. They did something that most large companies would never do. They gave these kids, basically, the authority to forget about approval process, forget about lawyers. Something cool happens, post it. And try to get it up in a minute. Sometimes things would be up in 30 seconds. And so they built this community that at the end of the process included 30 million people globally following the World Cup through Nike's Facebook page. And at the end of the World Cup, without spending $60 million for the sponsorship, they had higher unaided awareness than Adidas. So if you asked their core customers globally who did the most advertising and marketing during the World Cup, more people would have said Nike than Adidas. And they, for many quarters after that, started to experience market share gains. I put this in here because that first case worked because the CEO took ownership of it and was able to get all the silos in the room and say, hey, listen, you guys, you got to work together. So that's kind of a serendipitous, magical expression of what I'm talking about. This one was done in the marketing group at Nike. It didn't involve production and product design. This was a marketing program. But it was that same thing. Let's start with a big idea. Let's start with an idea that's real, that actually does something that people value. And let's put all of our weight behind it. Let's not let all these different groups run off and do their own thing. We're buying into this idea. And Carrie Hoyt-Pack, who was the director-level Nike person who did this, can sit there and know that this program had a global impact on the market share of Nike athletic footwear in this football footwear in this category. And that's a huge deal. And I just think it's an example, again, of big ideas driven down into the channels, not the other way around. So collaborative innovation was the last thing. And I know there's a lot of talk about collaboration. I think most people who think about innovation and creativity, particularly traditional advertising creativity, think of as a lonely pursuit. And that collaboration will somehow lead to committee thinking and subpar ideas and mediocre executions. That can happen. I suspect everybody in here has been invited to sit at the big table where you and people from other agencies are sitting around talking, and the client's there, and you're brainstorming, and it just inevitably becomes very muddled because nobody in that room has the same goal. In fact, no matter how much you want to be a great partner, you just can't escape that feeling that the person across the table is trying to take the food out of my children's mouths. And so how can we honestly collaborate in an environment? Even in holding companies, I think you all know that's still an issue. It's hard to get people all working together. And we got into this fix. Oh, let me just add. And a lot of these ideas, the ideas that you've seen, don't happen because one person came up with an idea. These were all group ideas that came from a variety of disciplines, finally coming up with an idea and then brainstorming and hammering it home. We got into this fix because traditional marketing has become a very linear process. You can have a company in California do some research and gain some insights about the customer. Then they can give it to a company in New York that would create the marketing, the advertising, and produce that advertising. And then they can hand it off to a company in Chicago who would buy the media. And those people may have talked to each other, but they didn't really have to, and often they didn't. And the whole industry became segmented that way, with separate companies, separate P&Ls, focused on chunks of this linear process. And the client would come in at the end of each piece. So the client was kind of a hop-in kind of thing. All right, the research is done, the client sits down, says, yeah, I buy that, I don't buy it, okay, I bless that. Off it goes to the creative development. When that's done, the client would drop in and agree that that was right or wrong and move on. And then finally, at the end of the whole process, the client could come in and say, we got the right media plan, we got the budget, it's all good, go, make it go. That's not how the big table needs to work. It's not linear, it's iterative. And the client cannot sit off to the side and wait for an aha moment, Ta-da! You're gonna clap, you're not gonna clap? That just doesn't work. The client has to be a part of it. The client knows things that we don't know. The client can guide the process. So the interesting thing about this Nike process is they really did do it together. This campaign was pretty much put together in a 3-day session, and the major players was Razorfish, Wieden and Kennedy. Wieden and Kennedy is interesting because we've shared this account for a decade, and they're a fantastic organization. Fantastic, can't say anything bad about them, except I think they go in every 3 months and tell Nike they should fire us and that they can do what we do. And I know Mindshare is in there every week telling them that. Anybody here from Mindshare? I don't blame you. I would do the same thing. And AKQA was one of the partners on this. And AKQA and Razorfish, if you look at our capabilities, we're like direct competitors. And even though Tom Bedecaray is a good friend, every time he wins, I kind of get it could have been ours. No, he feels the same way if we win. So this is not ideally set up for creative collaboration. This is ideally set up for fistfights. And the thing that made this work is Carrie and her team were there for the whole 3 days. And there was no go off, come back. There was no hiding in your corner and coming up with an idea and coming back and pitching. And it started slowly. I think Mike Reeder, or who we refer to as Reader in the business. Mike was there, and it started slowly, and it was hesitant, but Nike imposed a discipline of true collaboration, and by the time that meeting was over, the basic program was hashed out, the responsibilities were set, and each organization had the ability to go create, innovate, do something exciting within their area, but the boundaries were set. And Nike was a big part of that, and they ran it. And I do believe that this is a model that works really well, and I'm not sure I've seen any others. I know they must be out there, but this is the best example I've seen. And it didn't take a lot of time, not a lot of pain, not a lot of screaming and yelling. It got to the core of the idea, got the execution plan together. And people talk about integration. I just think that's a horrible word, because there's this idea, well, we should integrate, which means we take all these disparate things and somehow have them line up in some sort of nice, organized fashion. We don't need integration. We need collaboration and innovation. We need the ideas being put together in a collaborative way. And that's a great example of how to do it. So that's all I really wanted to talk about. I've got, whenever I go to these things, I listen to someone talk, and I figure I'm lucky if I just remember a handful of things and write them down. So just in case you wrote down the wrong things, I'm going to tell you what you should remember. So these are things to remember. First of all, product development. Are you helping make the product better? And don't tell me you can't do it, because I know you can. Your organization can do it. Your company can do it. Digital, for the vast majority of brands, is a critical part of the product experience, and you all need to be thinking about that. We need big ideas. They're just different than the old big ideas. It's not good enough to have a lot of great tactical programs in all the channels and believe that if we integrate them somehow, that will be great for the company. That'll be good for the company. If you want to be great for the company, you have to have a truly big idea that drives down towards a product differentiation and into all the channels. Idea down planning, I guess I just talked about that. Collaboration, you do need, if that model I talked about doesn't work, then find a new one. That's half the fun of being in this business right now, is nobody knows what the hell they're talking about. I could be full of shit. You can go out and figure out a better way to do it. But collaboration and iterative planning and focusing on a big idea and doing it together and making it magic is the key to making this work. Reality. And to me, this is the key. If perception, reality, if you boil everything down to what's changed, I had those 2 slides at the beginning, the last 50 years and the next 50 years, marketers are not just working on perceptions anymore, they're working on reality. Got to build something. And this all sounds very painful and trying, so what's the benefit? I mean, why the hell should I do this? My experience is when you're part of an organization, part of a project, part of a team that pulls this off and does it well, it's just a gas. It's a lot of fun to do something that all through the process at the end you think, man, that's great. Because so often we're stuck in this, if only. Geez, if only we were organized differently. If only I had control over that. If only we had more money. If only this, if only that. Finger pointing, whining, whatever you want to describe it. This is just a lot more fun. I guarantee it will generate more recognition. You do things that drive the business forward. You're going to get promoted. You're going to make more money. You're going to walk taller. Good things will happen. Someone once gave me a piece of advice that I think was the best career advice I ever heard. Said, what you're working on, is it directly related to what the CEO cares about? And if it's not, go volunteer to work on something else. And if you're always working on what the CEO cares about, absolutely spectacular things will happen to you in terms of the projects you get, the money you make, the promotions you get, the satisfaction you get out of your job. Everything that's important to you will happen if you're right in the line of fire on what's most important to the CEO. You may be doing something useful and important over here, but it won't get you where you want to go unless you're right there. So much more recognition for these kind of programs. And I think more satisfaction. It just feels good. There's just nothing like being part of something and knowing that millions of people changed their behavior because of what you did. That the consumer actually changed their behavior and did something different. It's a very satisfying feeling because it makes you feel that I'm working on something that matters. I'm not just trying to trick people into buying the product. So that's the end of the talk. I have room for questions and answers. I do like to engage on this topic, so if you want to follow on Facebook, you can go to Do or Die Book. You can also find out where to buy the book there, although I know most of you won't because for some reason people don't. When group this size, I'm going to bet 5 will buy the book because I'll go check later today. But there's thousands of people on there talking, and I'd love to have you part of it as well. Whenever I see something that I think is an example of this kind of work, I post it up there and try to keep that going. And Twitter at Clark Kokich. So how much time do we have? Any time? 5 minutes. So any questions? Yes.
I'd love your thoughts on this because I heard you talking about Virgin America, and I'm a huge fan, and I love their branding, and I love every single thing you said about what they're doing. But there was an article in Time Magazine, I think just a week ago, why is an airline that everyone loves losing money? They just got voted the best airline in the country. They win every award you can possibly win, and they're just draining cash. People are worried they might actually go out of business. So why do you suspect this is happening? Is it just the economics of the airline industry, or why is the best product on the market losing money?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question. My suspicion is that they're all losing money right now. I mean, it's just a really tough time to be in the business. And I fly Virgin to California all the time, and the planes are always packed. I mean, they're full. But I suspect they're filling them through yield management that includes discounting tickets, and gas prices are high. I just think it's really tough to make a buck. I have no idea if business is better, they'll be financially viable. I don't know. I wish I could answer that question. Yes. Anybody else? Yeah.
Hi. You talked about the iterative process, and I've been at tables like that too, and sometimes having paramedics on standby seemed like a good idea.
Good idea. Yeah.
Right? So, just the question is, whose role is it to actually keep egos in check on a table like that? Who do you think that, because sometimes the client has a good time and it's healthy competition for the client, it works in their favor.
Yeah.
So whose role is it, do you think?
Well, I think where it falls down is nobody is given ownership. You can't ask people who are competitors, and even within a company, if I'm working in search, I'm a competitor with the person in display, media, because we're competing for dollars. There's a fixed amount of marketing dollars, and the budget's going to me or it's going to that other department. And I wish it wasn't that way, but that's life in a big company. So people who have competing interests, just let them loose in the room, doesn't work. And so there has to be an authority figure who is going to keep the focus on the right idea, not who's got the idea, but what's the best idea. And I think that's where it often falls down. There's this naive hope that if we, why can't we all just get along? And so what worked there was the client was in the room and took that role. You know, I'm going to make these decisions right now. That's the easiest way to do it, because the client ultimately has that power in the relationship anyway. And if they decide to exercise it, nobody's going to stop them. In agencies, I think where we've not done that well, where we've had groups working together, it's because there was nobody in charge of the process that was given the authority to make the decisions. No collaborative system like that can work unless someone's put in charge and said, you own it. And everybody here, that person owns it. And I think people don't like to make those tough decisions. And I think there's kind of a lot of wishful thinking going on in the industry that somehow we can all just get along and make it work. I mean, we had we worked on Best Buy Media for years, and Starcom did the offline and we did the online. And when we put the companies together, and some of you probably remember this, put the companies together, and they brought in a new head of marketing, senior vice president of marketing, and was asking the good questions like, why can't you guys be working together? And it was obvious that if we didn't, they would fire us. So I came back and told the team that the woman who runs the Starcom budget is going to run it, and we're going to be part of the team, but she runs it. And I was not popular back at the office. I can guarantee that. I think people just thought that was a horrible idea. But Megan Tweed is still on it. She's still working it. I talked to her a month ago in our media group. It's working. There's challenges. She probably wishes it wasn't that way, but there's a clear line of authority, and it's working. And 2 years later, they still haven't fired us when they certainly could have. And we're doing integrated collaborative planning. And people need to be willing to make those tough decisions. Yeah.
So thanks for the great talk. I had a question more about what do you do when you're dealing with a client that's not as aware as, say, Nike? Like, how do you educate a client on the need for that big idea, big thinking kind of model?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to do by going around talking about this stuff. And trying to find more cases. I wish I had more cases, because people say, oh yeah, Vail, that's skiing, that's Nike. Yeah, but we can't do that. I think there's more and more body of work. It's just, when people start losing business to companies that are doing it correctly, I think there will be a wake up in the industry.
Do you have any strategies specifically as an agency working with these companies that you'd say, like, these are great ways to help educate them and bring them along on that?
I think the best thing you can do is just talk about the cases and examples of companies that have done it well, either within your own roster or the world at large, that this is what we should be shooting for. We need a big idea like this. And I would engage them in the process. If you just show up and say, this is what how we're going to do it, I think it won't work. Get them to buy into, yeah, I wish we could do that, but we can't. Why not? Well, we have this problem. Well, why do we have that problem? Why? Someone once told me another way to solve problems, just ask why 5 times. Why do we have that problem? Well, then, but why do we have that problem? And eventually you get down to what the real problem is. And then you can start thinking about solutions. But I do think letting them see what's possible is about the only way you can do it.
Thanks.
Do we have any more time? Okay. Thanks a lot.